Good morning, everyone.
Okay, I think everyone is in from the waiting room. We'll probably need another minute for people to connect to audio and everything, but Lauren, when you're ready, you can take it away.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Thank you for joining us. We are excited to tell you all about the new grant program that the Colorado Broadband Office just launched, as well as our letter of intent process, which is the first step in our grant program. Just wanted to make you aware of a couple things. We do have Colorado Broadband Office staff on the call, so we're all here available to answer questions as we go. A few logistics before we start. Megan, if you want to go to that logistics slide, thank you. We are recording the webinar. That way we can post it to our website for those who weren't able to attend, or you can go back and listen in case you missed anything. Everyone is currently on mute. And then we are asking that you hold questions until the end. We have a lot of information, so we might be able to answer some of them as we go. But we will have a question and answer session at the end. And you can raise your hand or you can chat your questions at that time. So Megan, if you can go to the next slide. So why are we here? We're here because the Colorado Broadband Office is working to bring Coloradans access to high-speed internet. So nearly every aspect of our lives involves technology, and we believe that those who don't have access to it can be at a serious disadvantage. We are receiving funding from various federal programs over the next few years. So in order to deploy those funds, we created a grant program. It's called Advanced Colorado Broadband. Hopefully some of you received all of our communications that came out this week about that program. The first step in this program is going to be the letter of intent. So the purpose of today's call is to give you an overview of the grant program and then also to really dive deep into that letter of intent process. The window for letter of intent is open now, and they will be due on July 18th, but we'll talk a little bit more about the details and timelines and stuff as we go through the webinar. So at this time, I'm going to hand it over to Brandy Reiter. She's the Executive Director of the Colorado Broadband Office to go into the presentation. So Brandy.
Great. Thank you for that introduction and overview, Lauren. So I'll jump right in. I know we've done quite a bit of outreach with a lot of you. I've met many of you in the field, but if you don't know me, I'm Brandy Reiter. I'm the Executive Director of the Colorado Broadband Office. I've been here since February, and it's just been an amazing experience so far, and I'm happy to get to this point today to launch our program and introduce our funding programs over the next couple of years. Of course, we're learning things as we go, so obviously, our approach will evolve with the evolving guidance from the federal government as well as some of our strategies, but I'm just really, really thrilled to be here in front of you this morning, bringing this information to you because it's really important. As I always say, it's an exciting time to be in broadband. So with that being said, we have Advanced Colorado Broadband. You should have received notification if you signed up for our newsletter. But we launched this, we created this program because we wanted to streamline our process to deploy this money. And our Advanced Colorado Broadband Grant Program allows us to review all potential broadband projects and determine if they should be funded, and then guide applicants to work together and ensure projects meet federal funding program requirements so they can receive funding, and then choose which federal programs we can use funding for them. So I say that we're kind of the grant maker, matchmaker. So that's kind of how I see our role. And then obviously to tell you about federal funding for broadband projects so that they have a positive impact to Colorado. So this is our overarching brand. We will have several programs underneath this brand, and we're happy to bring this to you today. So next slide. So so we're going to go over our LOI, like Lauren said, our letter of intent today. Our goal for today is, for the program, is to fund broadband projects that bring access to high-speed internet access for all Coloradans. And in order to make this big impact with federal funding, we need communities working together to determine areas of need, of critical need for broadband access. This means municipalities, local governments, tribes, utility providers. We want you working with industry, working with community anchors, even nonprofits to develop plans, putting plans together to address the need. Also to help areas of Colorado that are currently unserved, which means they have no internet, or underserved communities, which means these parts of Colorado have poor internet speeds. And then we want building and improving the state's middle mile network, which is the backbone of our broadband infrastructure that will enable reliable, fast internet for future generations. The current situation in Colorado, as you guys all know, is we do have a digital divide, especially with rural, our high cost areas, and even in our densely populated areas, which I call the urban fringe, that you would assume have high speed access to high speed connection, but they do not. So we're taking a comprehensive approach, but I know if you're on this call, it's preaching to the choir. You know what our situation is in Colorado for broadband, that's why you're here. And so, as I said, Colorado received millions of dollars for broadband expansion and improvements from the federal government programs over the next few years. And we're going to leverage 4 main programs to help bridge our digital divide. So that's the Capital Projects Fund, which if I say CPF, that's what I'm saying. That's the Capital Projects Fund. We like our acronyms in government. That is the main focus of this webinar, because that is our most immediate deadline in terms of availability of federal funds. And then we have Enabling Middle Mile Infrastructure Program. And you'll see in the form, the letter of intent, we do ask a question if you are leveraging middle mile. You can directly apply to the NTIA, which is the National Telecommunication Information Administration, for middle mile programs or for your middle mile projects. The state is also submitting our plan. And the purpose of asking you this question in your proposal is, if you are leveraging middle mile that has anything to do with state assets, we just want to know, because we can certainly pull that funding out for the state and put it in our plan so we have more money for capital projects. So we want to make sure we're not overlapping in terms of our proposals to the federal government. And then we have Digital Equity Act. These funds we expect in 2024, 2023. And then the BEAD program, which is Broadband Equity Access and Deployment. We have a long ways to go until that funding will be available. It'll probably be available in 2024, to be quite honest. But we are not talking about BEAD today. We will be doing a separate launch for the BEAD program itself. The scale is so huge and the scope is really, really, really comprehensive. So we want to do that separately. But today we're focusing on capital projects funds. But those are the 4 programs we're leveraging. Next slide. Great. So just a couple of important notes for you guys. For the capital projects funds, we are going to request a 25% match on those funds. Unless you can demonstrate that you are a community that has economic barriers to providing a 25% match. 25% match can be monetary, or it can be in kind if you want to take that approach. But we are looking for that. So if you're a community that can't afford it, you want to demonstrate the economic distress around that match. Obviously, the more match you provide, the more competitive your project will be. So just want to make that note there as well. The LOI is not required for federal funding, nor is it a guarantee of funding. I just want to put that out there. So we are going to be opening up our official grant program at the end of the year. So if you didn't submit an LOI, it's fine. I just think what I wanted to do, the goal of this is to submit your LOIs, to work with the state, because it takes time to develop these projects. for federal funds. Federal funding is very complicated. And if you're used to the middle mile programs through the Department of Local Affairs, those are a lot more, they're less complicated because they're state dollars. So the federal funds are a lot more complicated. So we want to work with you throughout the summer and the fall to develop these projects to ensure our success. I want to speak a little bit about the Broadband Deployment Board. Some of you guys are familiar with that. This is a board that manages and disperses grant dollars in the Broadband Deployment Fund, leveraging our high cost support mechanism dollars, which are state funds. I just want you to know that the Broadband Deployment Board will continue as they are, distributing those funds, so no changes there. And we're not at this time looking at them to be the board that is going to be in charge of disbursements of funds. I haven't looked at that yet. That'll be forthcoming over the next year. So, but they're going to be business as usual, continuing their work, the great work that they do. So I just wanted to answer that just in case anybody had a question about what role the Broadband Deployment Board plays. So going on to timelines, our LOIs, the period for our LOIs is we're accepting LOIs between June 15th and July 18th. So July 18th is a Monday. So if you have any sort of last minute things you have to wrap up, there's always the weekend before a Monday. So that's why we have it on Monday. The expected time to open the grant program, like I said, is in early 2023. So I would love to launch it before Christmas, but it'll be kind of challenging with all of the stuff that we have going on. So those are the timelines. Next slide. So now we're moving on to the letter of intent, and I'm going to walk you through the letter of intent to apply for federal grants. So I'm going to go through each section and explain each question. It's not a very long process. We tried to keep it simple, but I just want to walk you through each question just to elaborate and expand on what we're looking and the expectations for each one. Next slide. So we broke the letter of intent into a couple of sections. The first section is project proposal overview. The letter of intent questions are shaped for projects that may apply to CPF, and we want to understand our middle mile requirements if you guys are going to apply for those. Starting with the program overview, this section is required and asks for important information regarding your project. The first question is, which program are you interested in? There are two options right now. There's CPF and middle mile. And both, just so you guys are aware, CPF and middle mile, they both have the same deadlines for the state. So that's why we're running these two processes together. So you can select one of two options, or you can select both. And the next question is, why is this project important to your community at this time? So the intent here is to describe the critical need related to access, affordability, reliability, and or consistency that resulted from or was made apparent by COVID, or is consistent with the results that were made apparent by COVID-19 or public health emergency. So we want to know why this project is important to your community at this time. But we also need to highlight the fact that there might have been some impacts of COVID-19 that elevated your project. So just describe that for us in detail. The next question is, describe how the project is designed to enable work, education, and health monitoring to access critical services. So for CPF funds, you have to demonstrate all three of these. So it's not one or the other, it's and. I believe these categories are pretty broad, and just having worked in local government, I think broadband is at the intersection of all three of these. So you'll want to explain how your project enables these three categories. And then next, what quantitative and qualitative data supports your proposal? So an example of this is existing broadband performance studies, federal or state collected broadband data, user speed tests, interviews with community members or business owners, reports from community organizations, or any other information that seems relevant to you, that is relevant to the subject. So we want a description of this information. And if you have any reports or anything you want to share with us, you can certainly email those. I think there is a email contact in the form for that. So next slide. So how will you engage your community to shape the project plan, implementation, and operations? So examples of this, we're looking for community engagement, so community meetings, surveys, any surveys on speed tests related to community engagement. So community engagement is very important and is something that CBO is looking for, and it is a requirement to leverage or utilize capital project fund dollars. And so, you know, if you've done some of that outreach already, you can certainly leverage that. If you haven't yet, because I know everybody's in various stages of the broadband conversations in their communities, you know, between now and when the LOI closes, you know, you can host a community meeting on broadband just to demonstrate that you've made some sort of outreach or connection to your community regarding broadband. And then also, you know, if there's partners in your community that are doing that as well, you can also showcase that. It doesn't necessarily have to be specific to local government. If your library is doing it, if your school is doing it, certainly provide that information in the LOI. The number of households, businesses, and communities your project will serve. So this is a really important statistic. This is not required for CPF, but it is required for CBO because our Governor Polis really wants to track what difference we're making in our communities. So we'll want to know that information. And for the community piece, I recognize that there might be some counties that are doing work on behalf of their communities. So if that is your model, that's where the community piece comes from. So I'll use my own community. I live in Eagle County. So if Eagle County was doing something on behalf of all the towns in our county, we would want to know how many of those communities you're trying to impact. So we want all that data. More data is really good at this point. So just go ahead and populate that. Are you participating in the Federal Affordable Connectivity Program, which is ACP? And will you provide a low-cost option in addition to your AC participation? So we want to know this information. This is a requirement to leverage funds. So any federal program requires you to participate in the ACP. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on that this morning because I could do a whole webinar on ACP. But basically, Treasury has identified the Federal Communications Commission's ACP as a federal consumer broadband subsidy program. The service provider must participate in to complete or to compete in the broadband infrastructure projects or complete them. And then state recipients must require that service providers participate in ACP for the lifespan of the broadband infrastructure project, or until the ACP or its successor programs are no longer operating. So there is a requirement to provide an affordability component of your projects for a period of time. So I encourage you, we have the website up there on the slide, so click on it. And if you have any questions, you can certainly follow up with us, but I just want to kind of touch on that real quickly. And of course, project start date and end date. I realize that in this broadband space, we have supply chain issues, labor issues, and all of that stuff. So the project start date and end date is just an estimate. So yeah, just give us a timeline that you think that you might be able to do this. And I would also encourage you to be conservative in your estimate as well, so that giving yourselves much time. We're not going to hold you to it, but we want to have a good idea of what you're doing, what your timeline is for your project, because these funds do have timelines embedded into their program structure. Next slide. So the budget section, this section is about your project budget. So we know all of you can provide estimates at this time. And so I'll elaborate on each one of these. So we have pre-design, engineering, permitting, and labor, supplies and equipment, and we would like to have your total budget. On the supplies and equipment, we're talking about construction, fiber devices, anything that's physical. So I just want to highlight a couple of examples. The other thing is carrier neutral locations, meet-me centers, telecommunication huts, any sort of physical infrastructure that you are building. So just want to highlight that. And then you can provide numbers. So these are estimates, of course. And in the form, don't change the categories, just leave them the way they are, because this is how the Treasury Department wants these displayed. And if you really don't know, if it's really hard to come up with numbers, you can always provide percentages, but we would like for you to try to provide numbers if possible. If you want to provide numbers and percentages, then, you know, that's an A+. But anyway, just want to kind of highlight those. The one thing about pre-design work is that this can be planning money. So, you know, so any planning money that or pre-design monies that you're spending, definitely want to showcase those as well, or highlight those. Next slide. So there's three categories of funding that you can, or three types of projects that you can apply for CPF funds for. There's infrastructure, digital connectivity, and multi-purpose facilities. I will start out with infrastructure. So this is pretty straightforward. So this is going to be fiber, towers, satellite. Well, not really copper or DSL, but it could be. I mean, unless your copper or DSL is going to give 120, it might. I don't know. I know mine doesn't. So those are going to be like the infrastructure projects. So if you have any questions, we can answer those a little bit later. But next slide. So in the information section, we want to know, how is this proposal designed so that it does not duplicate existing investments from enforceable federal or state funding commitments for reliable wireline services. I'm just going to pause here and tell you that the Capital Projects Fund, it is a wireline preference, so a fiber preference. So we want to see as much of that as possible. We do know that, you know, satellite and fixed wireless, you know, those are definitely solutions depending on where you are in Colorado, but this program really highlights wireline. It's a wireline middle mile type infrastructure program. So basically, CBO can provide resources to help you gather some of this information to figure out where there's overlap. We do have our data and mapping hub website up on the slide deck. We are also, CBO is going to work on an additional mapping resource for support for your LOI, which includes the CPF speed requirements for Colorado. So you can go in and look at, okay, so where's my project going to support or provide 120, 100 symmetrical, and focusing on those to help guide your decision making if you need that resource. So we'll go ahead and email that when it's ready. We don't have it available right now. We are prioritizing it, so it'll be ready maybe in a week or so. But make sure you're signed up for our newsletter, or make sure you contribute or participate in our listserv so you guys have that. The NTIA also has resources for mapping, and it shows 120 so that you guys have that as a resource as well to help inform your proposals that you'll submit to CBO. That website is also up there. So upon project completion, we want to know, how will you ensure service that reliably meets or exceeds symmetrical download and upload speeds of 100 megabytes per second? So capital projects funds, we prioritize 100 symmetrical. If you can't get the 100 symmetrical, yeah, we ask for your project to be in compliance with 100 down, 20 up. So those are the requirements. If because of a geography or topography or excessive cost that is not possible, tell us why. So why you can't achieve either 100 symmetrical, 120, or something below that. Tell us how you will, and then tell us how you will ensure that it reliably meets those or exceeds those speeds in your answer there. And we also want to know what type of technology you'll be using. And there's a list of technology that is in the LOI that is eligible for CPF. So we already have those listed. So if you can kind of just stay within the box there, we covered most of it with that Dropbox, but the actual selections in the form are CPF language. So moving on to digital connectivity. These projects are going to be related to connectivity. So personal devices like laptops, tablets, desktop, personal computers, equipment, including access points, repeaters, routers, etc. There's a whole list listed on our website under Advanced Colorado Broadband. There's some resources there to help you there. But those are some of the examples of digital connectivity projects. Next slide. So with the questions here, first question, will the devices be used to connect to broadband internet? This is a simple yes or no. Has affordability been identified as a barrier to access to the internet? So again, in this section, we want to know about affordability. So if you answer yes, you're going to have to explain a little bit more. The LOI will ask for a summary of the evidence that shows that affordability is a barrier. So a couple of examples here. Broadband internet service performance and pricing. So that's an example you can highlight. And then you can provide examples of how you demonstrate affordability is an issue. You can look at federal or state collected broadband data as a source for demonstrating how affordability is an issue. User speed tests. There's also a variety of sources: American Community Survey, the U.S. Department of Commerce, the NTIA has indicators of broadband need maps. You can use that. I know we listed that a little earlier. Or the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's qualified census tracts related to internet use, device ownership, income, and poverty. So there's a couple of resources out there for you guys if you need them. But we want to use, those are just a few examples and sources that you can use to demonstrate the affordability issue with your project. And then the next question is, will funds be used solely to purchase devices? So this is a yes or no question. And then one, describe how ownership of the assets will be maintained by you as a subrecipient, and how will you make them available to the public? So this one's really important. As part of the requirements, any money that you spend on devices has to be owned by that entity. So for the period of the cycle. So I'll go over that of the funding period. So I'll go over that just in a little bit here shortly. So next slide. The next one is multi-purpose facilities. So these are going to be projects that under capital projects where I guess the definition of multi-purpose facilities is going to be, your community centers, your apartment complex, libraries, rec centers, office buildings, nursing homes, education facilities, etc. So your project has to answer how, if you're doing a project that includes a multi-purpose facilities, you have to demonstrate that multi-use facility, the broadband connection will enable direct work, education, and health monitoring. So sometimes, you might be able to use your community center if you're trying to connect your public buildings to broadband. That connection has to demonstrate that facility will also enable work, education, and health monitoring. Next slide. So just want to note here, projects to construct or improve buildings that are designed to jointly and directly enable work, education, and health monitoring are eligible for funding under capital projects. I already kind of gave examples of multi-use facilities, but projects to construct or improve libraries is an example that provide public access to the internet or for purposes including work, education, and health monitoring, such as offering digital skills programs and support for community members engaging in virtual learning. Another example is projects to construct or improve community health centers that provide a broad range of services to the communities that they serve, including access to jobs, counseling, employment services, health education classes, or internship programs for medical professionals. So those are just a few examples. And then the other one is, what type of features does the multi-use, multi-purpose community facility provide? So this can be personal devices like laptops, tablets, desktop computers, equipment, access points, repeaters, and routers. So we just want to make sure that you include those. And then again, touching on the period of ownership and maintenance, we're going to ask you to describe how the program project will provide services or activities that directly enable work, education, and health monitoring for at least 5 years from the completion of your project. So you have to demonstrate how you're going to own and maintain these for 5 years from the completion of your project. So that's the compliance period. And the state we have some, I'll go into compliance here at the end. So the proposal should have an explanation for each category. So for each one, and so you have to demonstrate how your project will enable work, education, and healthcare, and it's broken out. Those are required, so you have to fill out all three because that's what capital projects funds requires. So that's where we are with the 3 categories for spending. Your project can include one or all 3 of these options. So if your infrastructure project also includes multi-purpose facilities, make sure you fill out both sections. Or if it's just digital connectivity, fill out that section of the form. So those are the 3 categories. And then one of the things that I would like to highlight is that if you don't think that your project even qualifies for capital projects funds, don't worry about that. Just submit. The idea here is to get as many proposals from our state as possible, because if it's not quite a fit for capital projects, what we're trying to do is match it to other funds. So we're going to use this data to help inform all of our strategies for Colorado. And then speaking of strategies, I just want to put a plug in real quickly for our statewide broadband plan. We just launched that this week. Some of you might have received an email directly from me, or you're on our listserv. But we have a survey for local governments, and we have a survey for community organizations, recognizing that they're different. And for the tribes, where we've sent out the local government, but also in the tribal communities, if there's community organizations that are working in your communities as well, you want to make sure that survey gets out. But please fill that out. That'll also help inform our strategies for how we fund local governments and our organizations in our state. So that survey closes in I guess June 24th. So please fill that out. We'll send out a couple of reminders. If you don't know what I'm talking about, definitely reach out to my team, Lauren and Megan. We can get you connected to the survey. It's really critical. And then so one last thing before I wrap it up for questions is that if you do apply for funding for any of our federal programs, federal funds come with a lot of compliance. So you have to make sure that you are up for the challenge, or at least up for the idea that or the expectation that you will have to fill out reports for at least 5 years. And then obviously we'll be doing our compliance inspections. So free money is great, but it does come with a couple of strings. So just make sure that you're up for that and you're anticipating that as you move forward in your applications to the state, because it is something that is very important for those who are taking advantage of federal funds. So next slide. So in summary, the LOI we launched it June 15th. It closes July 18th. So this application, the forms that we sent out are due on July 18th. And then the expectation for funds is early. We will be opening up our official grant application early 2023. So we will have a whole process for that and outreach for that as well. And then CBO, just so you guys know, we want projects that demonstrate community-driven partnerships. So this is a community broadband effort. So we're looking for community and industry to partner. And then we're looking for projects that address parts of Colorado that currently have no access, prioritizing no access or poor access is secondary to high-speed internet. And those are defined by obviously the speeds that I mentioned earlier. And we want to know what your middle mile infrastructure plans are, because these are middle mile infrastructure grants if you're going for the infrastructure piece. And again, make sure if you're planning on applying directly to the NTIA for middle mile, please check that box. But these are middle mile projects. And I think that we will have plenty of money over the next couple of years to really, really make significant progress in the broadband space. And just lastly, the Colorado Broadband Office is here to help. We will be having community engagement opportunities meetings, webinars throughout the next year or two on all of our programs for the federal government. So I encourage you to hop on those calls or look at them at your leisure, because they will be recorded. So if you see us out and about, make sure you come and attend or say hi. And then communications through our CBO newsletter is where we have most of our updates and happenings. So please, if you don't have that, please subscribe. And you can email us at any time. The email address is there. And then all of our advanced Colorado Broadband program funding will be housed on our website on a specific page for you guys to have the latest and greatest. And with this and everything else, we try to make sure we have resources for you from the federal government, so you have time, so you have time and the ability to look at what are the requirements in detail. I know we can't cover every single thing today, but I just wanted to let you know we do have those as a resource for you, so you don't have to go dig around on the federal website. So with that being said, I just want to say thank you for taking the time today to go over this LOI. And we are very, very excited to see what our partners out there are going to propose for broadband. And hopefully we can make some of these projects qualify and really make a big difference in our communities. So with that, we're going to open it up for any questions, and I will have my team help me with those.
So thanks, Brandy. We have quite a few questions that came in over the chat, but why don't we go ahead to a couple of people have raised their hand here first, and then I'll address the chat questions. So Matt Salka, do you want to go ahead?
Yes. Hey, hi. Thank you very much. And great to see you again, Brandy. Matt Salka, County Commissioner in La Plata County. Brandy, you were at our meeting a couple weeks ago for our Southwest Broadband group that has multiple, two regions, Region 9 and Region 10, in a coordinated effort on middle mile projects. So my question is do we need to, cities and counties individually, submit for an LOI, or do we submit as a group?
That's a great question. So you can submit individually as a local government or as a county. It really depends on how you've established your proposal. And one of the things is we didn't want to be too prescriptive in which partnerships we were going to prioritize for submittal. So because every community and every region in the state of Colorado is very unique. So if your proposal includes working with your county, and you guys want to submit one joint LOI, that's great. But if for example, your county is doing something else and you have a different proposal as a local government, you can submit to us as well.
All right, thanks. Jared Masterson, do you want to go ahead with your question?
Yeah, sorry. I was not expecting to be so soon in the queue. So a couple of questions. You talked about just now the applying as a city or a county. So is this something that providers should be partnering directly, and then the city or county or local government should be applying then with some partners to make the work happen? Or should the providers be applying with, or basically the other way around, with local governments as partners? And then my other question is not directly related. You'd mentioned the multi-use community facilities. So would that cover something like doing some work to create a meet-me facility for internet exchange between providers in a community? So.
Okay, so to answer your first question, we're really looking for capital projects funds, the eligible entities are communities. So it's local government, it's tribes, it's rural electric associations. So providers can't really apply directly to the capital projects fund. So we are looking for community to do that with a private partnership, if that's what you want to do. If you're partnering with ISPs, yes, highlight that. But there might be some communities that want to apply to capital projects funds because they are the ISP. So that is totally fine as well. So, but we're looking for a community to put the application forward. And so to answer your second question on the Meet Me Center, or the carrier neutral location, that would be infrastructure, not necessarily community, or sorry, multi-purpose facility. So that would fall under that infrastructure category.
Okay, gotcha. And then just quick follow-up then on the first question. School districts or school district consortia, would that be an eligible applicant?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jared. Brandy, I'm going to ask a couple questions from the chat. There were two similar questions that came in, wondering about the state's current middle mile routes and if the state was going to be able to share that information.
So yes, we will be able to share that information. CDOT has a map, but we're also going to include that information in our strategic plan as well. But so that would be CDOT, and they have shared a map with us as CBO, but I can ask them if we can share it with others, but it'll be part of our planning, our major strategy. So one of the things, if you're looking to leverage that state middle mile, we probably need to have a conversation or put it in your application so that we can talk about it and follow up with you and show you and connect with you on where the state's planning to do some of those connections. But what I can do is I'll get with CDOT and make sure that we can share that map along with what we would essentially provide to you all on the speed map in the next week or so you guys can have that.
So I've noticed a couple people's hands popped up, and I'm wondering if it's in relation to this question. So Jared, is it in relation to this question? Do you need to add on?
Sorry, I had not lowered my hand.
Oh, got it. Okay.
I just
that happened too. That's awesome. Okay, Sarah Smith, you raised your hand as well. Do you have something to add to that? Good to see you, by the way.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Congratulations, CBO. This is incredible. I'm so proud of you guys. And it was so great to listen. And I just had a quick question. So is the CBO planning on applying to the NTIA middle mile program? Because it sounded a little bit like that's what people were asking, if you're going to release the routes that you're applying for through the NTIA, or maybe I'm misunderstanding.
Yeah, so Sarah, it's good to see you. Just so you know, Sarah Smith used to work for CBO, and you guys probably know her. She's now at the NTIA doing great work on behalf of Colorado in the BEAD program. But yes, the state is going to apply to the middle mile program. We are going to submit our plans, and the approach right now is to work with CDOT to figure out how much of that plan, how much CDOT middle mile fiber that we can include in that plan, or any sort of other routes as well. We do have a lot of state assets, so that might also include connections to our state parks, because that is middle mile as well. And I know most of our state parks are in rural Colorado, at least the ones I've been to anyway. So I know there's some on the Front Range, but the majority are out and about in the rural areas. So we're looking to leverage those assets. So we are including those in our middle mile program.
All right, thanks, Sarah. All right, Brandy, next question. Will the letter of intent filings be treated as public information, or should they be filed as confidential?
They are open to anything you submit to the state, unless it's been legislated that it is confidential. It is all open to public records, so it's not proprietary.
Thank you. Next question. Would infrastructure include excavation and trenching costs?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, sorry, I'm
and that
reading.
Would be, and just so you know, for that question in particular, excavation and infrastructure costs are probably going to fall in that construction. I think the construction category, or I can't go back to the slide, but. Anyway, there's a description on the form, but yes, it is part of the process. So please include your full cost in your LOI.
Okay, thank you. There was a question about whether or not we would post the slides from this presentation. I think we can definitely plan to do that. We'll put that up next to the recording as well on our website. Okay, next question. Is the deliverable for the July 18th letter of intent just an overview of, this came from Park County, what Park County would like to accomplish? Or do we have to provide all the data described by early 2023 when the grant applications are due? So sounds like basically the question, and correct me if I'm wrong, and this came from John Carr, so John, feel free to pop in, but are you asking just how much detail needs to be included? Or is this more of just an overview of what you would like to do?
This is an overview of what you would like to do, okay? And the reason why we wanted to do an overview is because I don't want you guys to spend, $100,000 on something if it's not vetted. But this is good. This, just so you guys know, what you're providing us will help the state fill out our grant and program plan to the Treasury Department, so they can give us kind of a pre-approval for the overview of your projects, what you're proposing to do, so that we can qualify them for funding later. So, and then those applications for more detail, which we will need after our grant programs, our grant plan, our grant program is approved, we'll need that detail. So we're giving everybody kind of like a 6 to 9 month runway to take your proposal, your idea from, high level conceptual to, actual, we're going to implement this. So, but we want to have this process first, because we don't want you guys to spend time and resources on something that may or may not qualify. So we want to vet these. So the next thing I'll do is I'll take what you guys have submitted in the LOI to July 18th, and I will meet with Treasury and we'll go through all of the proposals, and I will get feedback on all those proposals to see what we need to do, what works, what makes sense, what we need to go back to you for more information on. So this is kind of our initial steps. So hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, great. Thanks, Brandy. Okay, so the next question, what scale of funds are available? And this person noted that this will impact what scale of projects they're thinking about.
Yeah, so the scale of funding for capital projects, the state has received 171 million. We had to take some of that money for administrative overhead, planning, and feasibility. So there's roughly $162 million available in the capital projects fund. And since we did touch briefly on middle mile, the middle mile program, depending on the powers that be, we could receive anywhere from 5 million as a state to 100 million as a state. So it's a good chunk of change. It won't build out everything, but it'll make a huge difference. Where we're really going to see a huge wave of funding is in the BEAD program, because we're looking at 100 million as a minimum to the state in the BEAD program, and we can receive anywhere up to 500 to 700 million. So that's all based on data. I don't know exactly what the max will be, but we're working on it. So it's a pretty big scale, and the Digital Equity Act piece is just under $1 million. It's $900,000. So that's the scale of funding that the state of Colorado is going to be looking at over the next 5 years.
Okay, thank you. Next question, and I think you've already kind of touched on this. I'm going to read it just in case, but the question is, our city/county plans to have a project, but is also part of a regional project. Do you want an LOI for each county or for the whole region, for both?
If you have a regional project, our preference would be that one entity submits for the region. So you might want to pick who would do that. And then in your project description, just describe, which communities you're submitting on behalf of, if it's a regional collaborative.
Okay. Yeah, a couple questions kind of address that same thing. So I'm going to move on to the next topic of question. And if for some reason your question in the chat doesn't get answered, please feel free to raise your hand and we'll make sure that we can respond to it. Okay, so the next question is, what maps demonstrating broadband speed or access coverage are viable to use? CBO map, NTIA resources, speed tests from communities. Brandy, I think you kind of touched on this a little bit in the presentation, but I don't know if you want to elaborate on viable sources for data.
I'll touch on it, and then if I miss something, Megan, can you touch on anything I've missed? So in the presentation, we have a couple of links for you all to go and look, but I would say all of those are pretty viable in your development of your LOI. And so, and then, you know, we will email a specific capital projects fund speed map so you guys can look at that too. So and I know it's the mapping piece is always the number one question that I get when I'm reaching out, and it is a little bit complicated, but what I encourage you is to look at all of the mapping resources that we provided links for, as well as the CBO's data to help inform. The other thing too is since maps are challenging, especially right now, we're actually being really proactive in hiring a company to help us make them accurate. So, but I also would encourage you, if you guys know your communities really well. I mean, you know where folks are unserved or not served. So, you know, rely on your internal intuition on where things are, you know, where your areas are that are not served very well. I think, you know, speed tests, all of that stuff. Even if the maps are hard to kind of digest, you can even ask your citizens to do speed tests and report back to you on what their speeds are. And I know it's a point in time, but you know, you want to try to collect that data. So it's a combination of a couple of sources. And I don't know, Megan, did I cover it all?
Yes, I think that covers it all. Just reiterating, you know your communities and you know what speed or what services are there. So use all the data sources you can. If you suspect they are incorrect, try to find evidence, try to find data that refutes that so that you can include it in your applications. You know, more information is better in this case. So find as much as you can and reach out to us if you need help. You know, finding the data, knowing how to use it. And if you just have questions about speed tests or data sources.
Okay, thank you both. I'm going to move on to the next question. So we have quite a few and we're running a little bit low on time. So one question is, why only middle mile support? What about the direct service to households and businesses?
Because the federal government has guidelines that it supports middle mile. So we can't fund things that don't meet the federal guidelines.
Okay, thank you. Next question. I didn't see any reference to service providers. Are these programs for public entities only?
Yes and no. You know, the assumption is, excluding uni broadband, that communities would partner with ISPs and industry to provide service to their community. So CPF has eligible entities that can apply to these funds, and it does not include ISPs. It includes community. It has a whole list of people that can apply. And if you have any questions, you can look at the resources on our website.
Okay. This question, when do you anticipate funding will be available in 2023?
So early first, when they're available, so our application process will open in 2023. So as soon as we get approvals from Treasury and the state receives our funding based on approvals, we're probably looking at maybe a second quarter, late first quarter, second quarter availability of funding. But we'll provide more details on it as we go.
Yes, we will. Next question, you referenced duplication, but redundancy is important, especially for critical facilities in 911. How does this fit with funding?
For redundancy?
Yeah, duplication.
So if you're providing a redundant middle mile loop, we would certainly want to see that in your LOI. And again, preferences for fire or for fire, or sorry, not fire, 911 wireline. So if we want to see those, so if you have a proposal and it's a redundant, if it's a redundant wireline, just put that in there and put it in infrastructure.
Okay, next question. Fiber is the obvious preference for the capital projects fund, but I'm wondering how including fixed wireless solutions where fiber is not feasible will be perceived. Is it possible that this can be funded using CPF dollars?
No, it can't be. This is middle mile wireline preference funding, where I think we'll probably see opportunities for fixed wireless, because you're absolutely right. There's areas in Colorado just fiber is not going to make sense from a business case perspective, and not those types of projects we would be looking at for BEAD, and that is not what we're looking at right now. But we are, like I said earlier, the next steps after we get through CPF is to look at BEAD.
Okay, and Brandy, I think you might have touched on this, but I just want to make sure. This question is, I thought private entities, so ISPs, for example, were eligible to be subrecipients for CPF dollars. Is Colorado choosing to only distribute CPF dollars to public entities?
Our preference is for public entities.
Okay, thank you. All right, next question. With the mix of networks, has thought been to overall network management and who carries that task?
It really depends on the partnership that you are proposing. If you're doing a municipal broadband, you're doing all of it. But I've seen in the field where communities, what they'll do is they'll build out the middle mile and they'll bring on a provider to do the network management and maintenance. And so that seems pretty prevalent in Colorado, because a lot of communities don't want to be the ISP. So, whatever model you have, I would encourage you to put it in your LOI, especially because we'll want to see that for capital projects, how you're going to maintain and operate whatever project that you're proposing.
Okay, for sake of time, I'm probably just going to pick a couple more. And then we have quite a list on the chat of questions. So it sounds like maybe our team can look at these after and send responses with some of our information as a follow-up to the webinar. Does that sound okay, Brandy and Megan?
Yes, that's
okay.
Great.
All right, so I'm just gonna ask two more. Will we receive feedback on the letters of intent we submit from you prior to the application? This person just wants to confirm that that's accurate, that they understand.
Yes, you will.
Okay. Okay. Does the state have any access or guarantees to the previous middle mile state infrastructure project, EagleNet under BTOP?
Do we have any?
So this is from Tim Scott. I don't know, Tim, if you want to pop on and just elaborate on your question, if you're still here.
Yeah, good afternoon. So basically, the question was, so the previous middle mile statewide project under BTOP, under the Obama stimulus, was 100 and something million that the state got. So that was funded and built. I think the status is a little unknown. There was definitely some ZAO involvement there. And I'm just curious as to whether that forms any of the strategy for what the state will do from a middle mile perspective as it moves forward.
Tim, it doesn't, because the programs that we're dealing with are different than when EagleNet was part of the previous Obama stimulus money. So the federal government has learned a lot from some of that initial investment years ago, and so they put together funding strategies that make sure that ensures that, you know, what gets funded is delivered, gets delivered. So we have a different funding strategy. That the federal government is giving money directly to states as grantees to sub-grant out to local governments and local entities through public-private partnerships that communities decide are there, that will help them solve their broadband problems. So it's more of, if I were to summarize, it's more of a local control funding strategy than it was whenever the Obama administration put those dollars out, which I think is, in my opinion, I think it's the way to go, and I think it'll help solve some of these issues that we have.
Okay, thank you. And then just, oh, sorry, go ahead.
There's one more question on here, like the Ookla data. I keep seeing this. The state has recently purchased Ookla data. So we just purchased that, and it's really fantastic. And we are using that, and we will use that going forward to help create that real world information that you're talking about.
Okay, thanks, Brandy. I also see one more too that we can address really quickly. They just want to make sure that the LOI is not necessary for the actual CPF grant application later. And we said, no, that is not required. The LOI is not required. It's also not a guarantee, but like Brandy said, it's giving us an overall idea of what's projects are planned. So the rest of the questions, we will respond to outside via email. There's a lot of really good questions. So, and as always, we'll make sure you all have our email address as well, so you can reach out to us with additional questions. But we're done for time. So thank you guys very much for joining us and for your partnership and bringing broadband to Coloradans. So thank you very much.